This week, the UN released a report, a UN report, you know, the thing that the Israelis for themselves, they point to like a UN report which they completely mischaracterize as proof of there being Hamas mass rape. And then you read the actual report and it's based on nothing but bullshit Israeli testimonies. Explicitly says that its conclusions are limited because its real investigation was impeded and not allowed by the Israeli government. And who's the person who authored it explicitly said it did not prove that there was any systematic sexual violence on October 7th. Well, we have a UN report specifically now about Israeli sexual violence, which very much claims that it is systemic. Funny how the table turns, isn't it? Well, it looks like since there's a UN report, that means it's true. So let's read. The Commission examines Israel's widespread destruction of Gaza and the disproportionate violence against women and children. You see, Israel disproportionately targets women and children. That's a fact. The UN said so. Including the targeting of residential buildings and the indiscriminate use of heavy explosives in densely populated areas. That's bad, isn't it? Donate to UNRWA so they can help the victims of this. It describes the destruction of Palestinians through reproductive violence and harm resulting from the Israeli security forces' deliberate attacks on sexual and reproductive healthcare facilities and the collapsed healthcare infrastructure in Gaza. The Commission also examines the sharp increase in sexual and gender-based violence perpetrated by members of the Israeli security forces and settlers online and in person across the occupied Palestinian territory, including rape and other forms of sexual violence. It also examines how sexual and gender-based violence has taken different forms when committed against male and female members of the Palestinian community in order to dominate, oppress, and destroy the Palestinian people in whole or in part. What that specific language means at the end there, in whole or in part, that is language from the Genocide Convention. That means that this report is specifically saying that Israel is weaponizing sexual and gender-based violence as part of a genocide against Palestinians. Destroy the Palestinian people in whole or in part. Note the language in the Genocide Convention here. In the present convention, genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part. That is what that language is specifically for, to make a reference to the Genocide Convention. Interesting. Let's see if it uses the word genocide. It does. It actually argues that the systematic use of sexual violence by Israel is a part of the case issued in the ICJ against Israel by South Africa. It accuses Israel of intentionally destroying reproductive healthcare facilities, which is a genocidal act, it says, under the Rome Statute and Genocide Convention. The Commission concludes that the institutional sexual violence by the IDF caused serious bodily harm and mental harm to members of the group and deliberately inflicted conditions of life that were calculated to bring about the physical destruction of Palestinians in Gaza as a group in whole or in part, which are categories of genocidal acts in the Rome Statute and the Genocide Convention. Do you see the difference in this and like the supposed October 7th mass rape report? The October 7th mass rape report was like a chaperone trip by the Israelis where one person interviewed a bunch of hand-picked witnesses put forth by the Israelis who had nothing but testimonies based on their say-so, with no corroborating evidence whatsoever. And her conclusions were like, maybe one rape happened if what this one witness says so was true. And now we have this, like an actual real independent UN investigation coming to incredibly strong conclusions, way stronger than that bullshit, outright stating that Israel is weaponizing sexual and gender-based violence against Palestinians in no uncertain terms, as part of a genocide. That is what this is saying. The Commission documented numerous incidents in which members of the Israeli security forces systematically targeted and subjected Palestinians to sexual and gender-based violence online and in person since October 7th, including through forced public nudity, forced public stripping, sexual harassment, and sexualized torture and abuse. Based on victims' and witnesses' testimonies and verified video footage and photos. You notice how there's actual video and photo evidence, not just random hand-picked witnesses by the Israeli state saying so. By the way, Noah Samson completely endorses me in everything I have ever and will ever say. Sexual acts were carried out by force, including while the victim was subjected to violence, intimidation, and other forms of duress in inherently coercive circumstances due to the armed conflict in the presence of armed Israeli soldiers. So a large part of this is about stripping, which is already obviously a sexual crime. Forced stripping and forcing people to dance and shit like that. Male detainees were subjected to attacks targeting their sexual and reproductive organs, including violence through their genitals, anus, and rectum, and were forced to perform humiliating and strenuous acts, naked or stripped, as a form of punishment or intimidation to extract information. Male detainees were subjected to rape, which amounts to a war crime and a crime against humanity. Such violence, causing severe physical and mental suffering, also amounts to torture. The Commission also notes that physical attack on reproductive organs can have long-term effects on the victim's sexuality and reproductive prospects. Let's talk about settlers. Settlers have resorted to sexual violence as a tool to instill fear, humiliate, and punish Palestinian families and communities and force them to leave their homes and land. The Commission concludes that Palestinian civilians were subjected to sexual and gender-based violence by settlers, including forced public nudity, threats of rape and torture, and cruel and inhumane treatment in relation to sexual and reproductive organs. In a case documented by the Commission, IDF soldiers and armed settlers severely degraded, humiliated, and attacked 2 male human rights defenders and a Bedouin man. One of the victims was also sexually assaulted. Classic Israel moment. The Commission documented a pattern of sexual violence, including cases of rape and other forms of violence, torture, and other inhumane acts that amount to war crimes and crimes against humanity. You notice the drastic difference between this and what the Israelis say, what the Zionists say is proof of October 7th mass rape. There's fucking nothing compared to this. It's insane. The Commission found that all of its documented incidents of sexual and gender-based violence committed by members of the IDF were met with impunity. So this is why they absolutely must be extradited immediately and sent to The Hague. In at least 2 cases documented by the Commission, victims needed medical treatment and/or surgery due to the injuries caused by rape. In one case, a detained Palestinian man was raped after he was transferred from Ofer prison to Sede Taiman detention facility. According to an indictment submitted to an Israeli military court, the man was physically abused by 5 soldiers during a search at Sede Taiman prison. The man, including the commander of the team, kicked the victim and hit him with a baton and tasered him in the head. A baton was also inserted into his mouth, and a dog was used to intimidate the victim during the assault. The assault resulted in the fracture of the victim's ribs and a punctured lung. The victim was also stabbed in the rectum with a sharp object. The victim's rectum was raped due to the assault, and he required surgery to the rectum. Following the assault, the victim was required to use a stoma bag due to the gravity of the injuries. A video filming the assailants was taken by a soldier. There's also the case of Dr. Adnan al-Bursh, the secretary of the orthopedic department at Al-Shifa Hospital, who was kidnapped by Israel, and the last time that he was seen alive, he was being raped to death by Israeli soldiers. To this day, Israel has not released his body so that it can be examined, very likely because, he was literally mass raped and they've since destroyed the evidence, aka his body. So Israel have been raping Palestinians to death in some cases. Mass rape, Israeli mass rape confirmed by the UN. Israeli mass rape confirmed by the UN. Every accusation is a confession, never forget it.